Hello again. In the third of this series of videos about my new Database Analyzer Pro application, I'm going to show you some of the things you can get from the analysis results for any particular database. And we'll start off with the analysis I did in the previous video. I've gone straight to the main screen and I saved the analysis for a fairly simple, straightforward database here, access error codes. Once the analysis is completed, then, depending on the options you've selected, and if you remember I chose all of the options in the previous occasion here, depending on those options, then you will have one or all of these different buttons here available, each one of which opens a different subform in replacement to this one here. So let's take these one at a time then. The object info screen, the part that is absolutely compulsory in all, then has a list of all the database objects sorted by object type, forms, modules, etc., the name of the object. The third column here has the view or subtype, if you like, for each of those there. So you've got there for tables whether they're system or local, or if we had any in this database we don't, link tables. For forms and reports you've got the default view, which in this case a report view for both of those, and for both of these forms it's single. For any modules it tells you whether they're standard or class modules. The type field there is taken from the MSys object system table, and it tells Access, depending on that number, what type of object it is. So Access knows that -32768 corresponds to a form, -32761 to a module, -32764 to a report, and different sorts of tables will have different type numbers. And in some cases they're further divided with a flags field, which will tell you whether it's a system table, what sort of system table it is. If it's a query, we haven't got any queries in this particular database, whether it's a select query or an update query or whatever. The next column here, hidden, will tell you whether or not that object is normally hidden in the navigation pane. Tick means it's hidden. Of course, if you show hidden objects in navigation options, you can make these hidden objects visible again. System, these are the system tables that by default are not shown, but again if you tick show system objects you can make them visible. The include field, I mentioned this in the previous video, ticking that then allows you, when you do the get object sizes option, to include that as part of the analysis there. Also on this particular subform then you can choose to save any of these individual objects as text files. So for example, if I click on this one here, it's then saved that module there as a text file. I can choose to open it, and then it shows you all of the code for that particular module. Similarly for class modules, if you've got a form, similar idea, except this time the text file also includes all of the information that Access needs to recreate that if it imports that text file into another database. So it starts off with all the design information about the form size, the controls it contains, where they are, any particular properties for each of those, and that's a lot of information even for a fairly simple form. For complex forms it can be extremely long indeed. Once you scroll past all of that, eventually, if there is any code behind the form, in other words it's got a code module, then that line appears. Then there's 4 lines that tell Access how to interpret the information. You can ignore those, and then there is the code for that particular form, and there's quite a few different procedures in this case. For reports you get a similar idea. Let's take this one here, view that. Again, lots of information about the report design. We'll scroll past all of that. That allows Access to recreate it all instantly from just that information. Code behind form, those 4 attribute lines there, and in this particular case a bit less code there for that particular report. For tables, let's take one of the non-system tables. List of access error codes. So reviewing the text file, the first line then has the fields, 3 of them in this particular case, and then each of the records you've got the values for the ID field, the error number, and the error description. The second one here, error ID2, error number is 5, and the description, etc., etc., for all the others there. If you wish to save a bit of time, you can save all of those objects as text files. It doesn't take too long, and they'll all be saved to the same folder, and then you can open each of those individually in your own time, and you can also then open them and import them as text files into another database and basically recreate the object. Okay, I've already shown you the object summary, which is a simple tree view form. Metadata. The metadata will tell you more about the background information about each of the objects, the date it was first created, the date it was last modified, and if you have chosen to add a description here, which is optional, what that information is. And those three things will all appear in the navigation pane. In this particular database, only one object has got an object description. For tables, some of this information you've seen already in the object screen here. So you've got the table type, you've got the table name here. You can click on this button here and look at the design of that table, and you're actually opening that in effectively in the other database, except what I've done here is I've actually linked this to the current database. So what you're looking at then is a table that if you save it differently to how it is now, it will not affect the actual original database, so you can't effectively alter the design here. By clicking on the table name, then you can see all of the fields and all of the records for that particular table. Let's take another one here, design. This is one of the system tables, and the records for that. In this particular case, there's only one record there. And if we take another one with a lot of records, you can see all of those. You can look at the table designs, you can look at the table data. You can also again see whether it's hidden or not, whether or not it was included in the table size. I included them all before. You get information about the number of fields and the number of records in each of these tables here. So for this one here, we've got nearly 3,000 records and we've got 3 fields. Double clicking on that allows me to see what the details of those fields are. So we've got the order they appear in, the field name, the type of field, whether it auto number, long integer, text, etc., etc., which is the primary key, whether the field is indexed, how big the field is in terms of its size. For number field, or sorry, for text fields, that will actually be the number of characters. For a short text field, if you've got 50 characters limit, then 50 appearing here, and so on. Whether or not you've allowed zero length and whether or not the fields are required. Let's take a different table. If we go to MSys objects, then you've got, as the system table on which a lot of this information is extracted, then we've got the primary key field here, which is a long integer. You've got not an auto number for once here, but it's still indexed here. You've got long text fields, you've got date time fields that take up 8 bytes, you've got short text fields where you've got the number of characters, OLI objects which can be variable in length here, short text here of 255, the maximum, a binary character type here which is 254 bytes, a very odd size, and so on. Let's close that. Let's move on to the, and I'll just minimize this, let's move on to the relationships. Now the relationships, there's only 2 relationships in this particular database, and they are both for different system tables, the navigation pane groups. These are built into every new database here. So for this one here, then you've got 2 tables. It's an inner join, one to many. Referential integrity has been set, Cascade update has been set, Cascade delete has been set, and if we look at the information here, you've got that for that particular relationship in a little bit more detail. If we click on the print button, it opens a report which shows you that in a different format. And we're doing that for each of the individual relationships separately. We can do it for all the relationships together in one of the full reports, but I'll be showing you that in the next video. Queries, no queries in this particular database. I'll show you one in the next database which has got quite a few. So procedures then. Any code module that is in the database will be listed, and also each of the procedures within that code module will be listed. So form access error codes has got this number of different procedures. Each of those happens to be a sub, and each of those is private. In other words, the scope is limited to within that form only. Whereas we've got some functions here, we've got some public items here as well as private items, and it tells you the number of code lines for each. If we click on any one of these at random here, let's take that one here, you can look at the code for this particular item, and there's color coding shown there. Keywords are shown in blue, standard basic code is in grey, and if you have got any, nothing in that one but there is in this one, any comments are shown in green. If you happen to have any hyperlinks, again none in this particular one here, but let's look for one that has. That one's a pretty good guess. There you go, hyperlinks are shown in this standard format as well. If we click on the print code button, we can show that as a report. We can save that to PDF, or we can copy the code and we can then open e.g. Notepad and paste it in, the usual standard route there. Clear the clipboard again and close that. There is also a view code module button on there. I didn't actually show you that properly. Let me show you that again, different one here. View code module button, that does exactly the same thing as what I'm going to show you in a different way here. And that if I go on to here, we can show all of the code for a particular code module. So the declarations at the beginning and any APIs if you've got them, and each of the code modules listed separately there. If you've got a particularly large code module like this one, the resize form module, it may be too big for the code to be able to do the color coding, in which case color formatting is not available in this code module and it is just shown in grey. If you have got an underpowered machine, you may find it takes quite a long time to do the color formatting, in which case you may wish to turn that option off. And I will show you again the settings screen to say if you untick that, then you wouldn't get any color formatting in any module there, but it's on by default. Okay, let's minimize that again. So I've shown you all of this screen here, except to say that if you want to, you can shorten this screen and just filter it to a particular module, and then you can see the list of what you've got more easily. On to the next one, which is dependencies. This you may know from the standard access ribbon. Database Tools has got an item called Object Dependencies. It works well, it tells you the objects on which any particular object is dependent, and also any objects that are dependent on it. Unfortunately, you can only do it for one object at a time, whereas this analysis will allow you to see all of the objects, the number of dependencies, that is the number of objects on which it depends, as the tip shows there, and also the number of objects that depend on it. If we want to look at the details of those, we just click on here. Objects depend on me, there were two of them, and if we click on this one, we can see the objects that depends on a particular table here. If you have got any objects which were set up and dependencies were created and then an object was deleted or renamed, you could have orphans, broken dependencies effectively. There's none in this case, but if any of those have tick columns there, you know in your analysis that that is something you need to look at, in which case you can filter down. This would be enabled. Any references? By default, Access will have 4 references in every new ACCDB database. So that's the first 4 here. The first 2 are called built-in. They always will appear, and normally you would not be able to get rid of them unless there's a problem. They will be undeletable. The next 2 are normally added as well, but they could be removed if you really wanted to. I don't recommend it. And then any beyond that are ones that you've added yourself there. If you click on any one of those, it will tell you more details about the reference, what it's called, what its short name is, what its path is, a GUID which tells Access how to find it, version details, and so on. And if there is a broken reference, again something has been moved and it's not where it was originally, then that checkbox will be ticked there. and shown there, and another one random here, and so on. And again, we've got a report that can show you all of those, but again, that's something for the next video. Database properties, the last one of these, list of all the properties associated with any database. Typically you'll have at least 45 of those, sometimes far more, and you can look at the details of each of those, the property name, the property type, and what the value is. So in this case it tells me the startup form for this database is the access error codes form, etc. At the end of all this, if you wish to save this for further use, you've got two options. So for example, let's say you go to a client site, you take the analyzer with you, you analyze one of their databases, but you don't have time to analyze it on site, or you want to study it in more detail later, then click Save Analysis, like that, and then it will be available the next time the app is opened. If you don't need it again, just click No and it will be cleared, but if you need it again, do that. However, this application can only store one particular set of analysis at once, and so if you choose then to find another database and analyze it, that would be overwritten. So if you want to save it permanently, make a backup. It will then save a copy of this database with this analysis to the saved analysis folder, which will be set up if needed for the purpose, and then in just a very short time you'll have the rather long file name there showing the folder it's in. It's the Database Analyzer Pro app version 361, and then that's the database that's been created, and this long set of numbers here is the current date and time in year, month, day, hour, minute, second format. And again, because we're starting with an ACCDE file, it's still an ACCDE. And that pretty much is it for most cases. There is another case where you may be asked if you want to compact the database. That's not relevant here, but I'll show you that in another one that I'm going to set up now. So I'm going to now browse. I've already cleared the option to show the information message on browse. I'm going to leave all of the other ones in place here, and I will show you a little bit more about those in a second. So let's go to a different database, and this time one with some queries and some linked tables. Now obviously the time it takes for this to actually run will depend on the size and complexity of your database here. Here's another one which has got a range of database objects which I've put in really just to illustrate how this works. And some of the table types, the link table types, are more unusual than others, and some of them will take a little bit longer than others to actually analyze, as you can see, but again the whole process is very quick. For my largest databases, rather than taking a couple of minutes, we'll be talking about 30 minutes or longer for these to run, particularly for things like object dependencies. If you've got thousands of objects, the number of possible dependencies to check can take a very long time. But this isn't going to take us much longer. And we're on the final step now. And again, you can see the estimated time left and so on. And you may get something like this completing size check occasionally. That's where you've got a series of complex tables. It can have to do them twice in order to get all the information from that. So that took me just over a minute. Just for an idea, the Northwind 2 Developers Edition that has recently been released, which is a fairly large database, takes on my machine just over 2 minutes to complete. On faster machines it will take far less than that. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of these screens again. I've shown you all of this here. Let's go to the relationship screen. There's something I didn't do last time. I'm going to do that this time here. So the relationships diagram. Now if we click on this, that will then open that relationships window in the external database. This is another one of those messages that you can optionally choose to not show in future. And if I now click no, and if I go to settings options and show external relationships window message, say no. If I now do it, it will automatically open the external database and show you the relationships window. And just to be alerted to that, this is one of 2 times where the actual external database is directly opened. Close that and we're back where we were before. And the other case is with queries here. So we've got a series of different queries, and it shows you for the queries screen here the name of the query. It allows you to see each of those queries in 3 different views, and I'll show you them in a second. It tells you whether it's a select query, append, delete, update, make table, DDL, crosstab, or any of the other possible types of query. It tells you the last view it was saved in, whether that was design view or SQL view. It tells you the flags from the MSys objects table that actually determines both that information, and also tells access whether it's hidden in the navigation pane. None of these happen to be. The number of fields in there, the number of records if it's a select, crosstab or union query. For action queries, they don't have records, they are obviously affecting records there. If you have parameters, it will show you those, and if you have any errors that prevent this being shown, it will show you the error number. In this particular case, none of these are a problem as far as the analyzer is concerned. And so if we actually look at any one of those, all of that information plus the query SQL is shown in this report, but you don't have to go to the report to see that. You can go to design view and it will open it in the external database. That's my other message. There you got the design view for that query. Rather than actually untick that again, it can be removed, that message, if you don't want to keep seeing it. You can also show the data. This one happened to be empty. I could have told that by looking at the records there. So look at another one, 32 records in this particular case. There they are. They're the fields. And we're not actually opening the database for that. What we're doing is we're effectively linking to that query. Do you want to save the changes to it? Well, I can save them, but because it's linking to it, it won't have any effect. And we can look at the query SQL as well. And we can copy that, place it on the clipboard, paste it into another document like Notepad or whatever. So that's the queries section here, and all the rest of it are items I've shown you before. Coming back to the tables though, now this one, as well as having local tables and system tables, has got a series of linked tables. And to make it easier to look at this on one screen, I'm going to untick the system tables here and just show you the local and the linked tables. And I've quite deliberately included tables from a whole series of different sources. Here's a linked SQL Server table, a linked access table, a complex linked access table which has got a column history field. We've got a linked DBase table. Probably not many of you use those these days, but they used to be widely used as an access linked table, and you can still link them today. You can have linked Excel tables of different varieties here. This one's an old one, this is a newer XLS file. Linked Outlook tables take a bit longer for Access the Analyzer to work here, and this one's a more obscure one still, which is a style sheet, a CSS file basically, and here we've got a CSV file. So we've got a whole series of different ones, and if it was an Azure SQL table or a SharePoint table or Dataverse or anything else, it will tell you what sort of table that is. It gives you all the information you want. And as before, you can look at the table design. Doesn't matter the fact that it's actually in SQL Server, and there we've got all the information about that. And again, we can look at the table there, and let's show you the DBase one for want of something different. There's a whole series of postcode data here, lots and lots of information. So with this then, I've covered nearly all the information, and the idea is that you would be able to examine a database in some detail and very quickly collect a lot of information about that, which will allow you to decide how best to approach making any changes necessary to bring that database up to date. So for example, if you've got a table which has got a large number of fields, that might be one where you look to see if there's any redundancy. If there's a table that takes more space than you'd expect, that probably indicates it's got attachment fields or whatever, and of course you can check that with looking at the fields item here. So from this then, it should enable you to decide fairly easily whether or not you wish to take on a particular client's database and improve that, or if you've got an old database of your own, what actually is going to need most urgent attention there. We can also look at a lot of this information in the reports, and that's the subject for the next video. So until then, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.